Hi, Roger Linn here, and I'm here in this video to talk about the new step sequencer that's built into our new software update 2.0.0. So in order to use it, it would be helpful if you had the labels here that are printed on this newer unit. Now there's three ways to do that. You can go to our website and download a PDF document that allows you to print out a label here, and a label here, cut them out, and then paste them onto this area here, this area here, and this area here. Or for $25, you can order a label that is pre-printed and pre-cut, and you get one label for this area, one label for this area, one label for this area. Or you can order a new top panel on the website, and that'll give you a unit that is perfectly updated to these newer units. So what I'm going to talk about is how to very quickly get a sequence going. And what I'll start by telling you is that I have this LinnStrument set into its default settings. In other words, if I were to hit global settings and then defaults, I would get it to these same settings. It's just like if you were to take a LinnStrument out of the box when you first get it. And those settings are: the left split is sending out on MIDI channel 1, the right split is sending out on MIDI channel 16, and I happen to have in my external synthesizer, I have a clean Stratocaster sound on channel 1 and a drum beat on channel 16. And those, by the way, are both tracks that are in, or sounds that are in, my downloadable Logic or main stage file. I have the left split set to clean Strat, and I have the right split set to Euro drum set, I think it's called. Actually looking here, Euro dance kit. And that's set to channel 16. So what I'm going to do right now is just create a sequence with that left split. Now, each of the two splits has its own sequence. So I'm going to turn the sequence on in the left split. So I press per split settings, and then with the left split selected, in the special column, I'm going to press sequencer, which is the fourth from the top. I turn off per split settings, and now instead of the performance lights, what I'm seeing is the sequencer view. Now what this has is a step bar at the bottom, steps 1 through 16. This area here is for all the notes you're going to play. And this area over here is for controls for the sequencer that are indicated by these printed settings right here. Now there are three different views of the sequence data: scales, drums, and notes. Scales is the setting I like best, and it's the default setting. And in that case, there's one row for each note in a scale. And the scale is determined by the scale you have set in the note lights on-off settings in global settings. And by default in LinnStrument, the natural notes are lit, which is a C major scale. So then those same settings are reflected in the scales view. So in this case, I have C here, D, E, F, G, A, B. So I'm just going to create a sequence here. I'm going to, well, let me take those out. I'm going to create a sequence like this. And now I'll press play, which is the alternate function of switch 2 in the sequencer. Now, you'll notice that some of the lights are green and some are light blue. The notes are lit in the two colors of the selected split. If the velocity is 96 or lower, it'll be green, which is the main color of the left split by default. And if it's above that, above 97 or above, it'll be lit in the left split's accent color. So I can play polyphonic lines too. Now I can also set the sequence to be looping less or more than 16 steps. For example, I'm going to set it now to loop just 7 steps. So I hold down switch 1 while I'm pressing that area of the step bar. I notice that the non-playing steps are now lit in lime, which is one of the new 4 colors in version 2.0.0. So if I play that, notice also that if there are no contents at a particular step, it will be lit in yellow. So it's yellow if there are no contents to the split. It's orange, which is one of the new colors, if that step is containing any notes. And it's lime if that step is not playing. I'm going to set the end back to step 16, so it's playing all 16 steps. But I can actually have the sequence be longer than 16 steps. And the way I do that is, the way to think of it is you've got a 32-step sequence. And that's what these lights over here are for. And I'll talk a little bit now about these controls, the sequencer controls. So you'll notice there are 4 yellow lights that one at a time are red. And what that's looking at is one quadrant of a much larger sequence. So if I'm in the left 2 quadrants, that's steps 1 through 16. If I'm in either of the right 2 quadrants, it's steps 17 through 32. So I can have a sequence that's anywhere from 1 step up to 32 steps, right? Now the upper 2 buttons, what they're for, is for pitches above those 7 rows, because there are actually 14 rows. So in this case, I've got in rows 1 through 7, I've got the pitches of the major scale, and then above that, I've got another major scale. And you get up to 4 notes per step. So what I'm going to do is address that upper left quadrant and play some other notes. So now I've got these high notes in this upper left quadrant, these lower notes in the lower left quadrant, and it's still playing just the first 16th notes. But what let's do now is let's create some notes in steps 17 through 32. So the first thing I'm going to do is change the sequence length to include all 32 steps. So what I do now is I will play, on the second 32 steps, I'll just play scales going up and down. So now it's going to play first the first 16 steps that we don't see. And now the second 16 steps. And I can look at steps 1 through 16, rows 1 through 7, or steps 1 through 16, rows 8 through 14, or steps 1 through 16, rows 1 through 7, or, where there is nothing right now, I was saying these are steps 17 through 32, and here's 1 through 7, and this is steps 17 through 32, and rows 8 through 14, which are the higher notes of the octave. So what you're basically looking at is, once again, 4 quadrants of a much larger sequence, and you see 1 quadrant at a time. Now let's say you're working on a 32-step sequence, and you don't want to have to wait for the second page to loop around each time. Well, that's what this button over here is for. It's called Loop Screen. So if I turn that on, and right now I'm selecting the second 32 steps, 17 through 32, second 16 steps, 17 through 32. If I turn that on, I will just loop the second half of the sequence. So that's a very handy editing tool. Now, if I turn that off, I'm going to go back now to the lower left quadrant, the first 16 steps, and I'm going to set the end to play only the first 16 steps. And once again, by holding switch 1 down, I do that, right? So I could have it be any length I want, and the non-playing steps will appear in the color line. So now it's just going to play those 16 steps. Here's another fun thing. Here's the reverse button. If I turn that on, it always plays in reverse. Or if I hold it, it'll play forward, and then reverse, and then forward, then reverse. And I can change the length. And I can do all this in real time. I'll take loop off now. Now, the sequence I was playing here is using what's called the scales view. And that's where each row is one note in the scale that's indicated by the lit notes in note lights on off, which is the same as the lit notes in your normal performance screen. The naturals, the C major scale. But I could also see this data in drums view. And you're not going to see anything right now, but in this case, in drums view, each of these rows has a specific MIDI note number that you can customize. And that allows you to have, for example, bass drum, snare drum, rim shot, hi-hat open, and something else, right? And the third view is notes view. And this gives you a view just like your normal performance view. And in this case, the notes that are playing in this sequence will appear where they would in the performance view. So if I scrub through them, I can see which notes are playing at each particular place, and I can enter them in that way if I wanted to. In this case, they would appear in red, just like the played notes do in performance mode. Another thing that's kind of handy is while you're playing, you can immediately jump to that playing step where that you hit by holding switch 2 down while you've hit the step. So there are a lot of creative things you can do. Now for the sequence, you can also set, in addition to the 3 different views, and once again we're in scales mode right now, which is the default, you can set your step size. So you can set it to 8th notes, 16th notes, or quarter notes, and then for each of those, you can set it to triplets, 8th note triplets, 8th note dotted, or 8th note swing. Or if you turn them all off, then you'll just have 8th notes. So you basically have 12 different step sizes right there, and they can be independent for the 2 simultaneous sequences. Now, speaking of the simultaneous sequences, we have these lights up here, and these are labeled left sequence 1 through 4 and right sequence 1 through 4. And what these do is they allow you to select one at a time, one of 4 sequences, or to play one at a time, one of 4 different sequences. So right now, let's go back into scales mode. Right now, I'm playing just this sequence 1 of these 4. But if I change this to sequence 2, I could make a whole different sequence. And at the end, it automatically switches back to the first one. And if you want to switch instantly, you double tap. So that way I can switch between 4 different sequences. And once again, the colors of that split are used. For the left split, the non-playing sequences are lit in the main color, which by default is green, and the playing split is lit in the accent color, which is light blue or cyan. Now the same thing applies for the right splits sequence. So what let's do is let's turn that on. I'm going to go into per split settings mode, select the right split, and once again I'm going to turn the sequencer on. Now I can switch between the left and right splits by pressing the split button. Now if it's green, the main color of the left split by default, then I'm showing the left sequence. And you notice that some of these colors are going to be in green, the main color. If I press it to, once again, so it's showing the right split, now it's going to show the right split's data, and I happen to have a drum beat already playing in here. Now once again, as I said earlier, the right split is playing through channel 16, which is going out to a drum set sound in my Logic sound file, the downloadable Logic sound file. So if I press play, I'm going to have both sequences play. The left split's sequence, which is what you heard before, and the right split sequence, which I happen to already have put in here, which is the drum beat. Now I can use these buttons to select sequences. Remember, I created that second sequence for the guitar sound. Wasn't a very good sequence. And by the way, if I don't like one of those sequences, I can hold clear, and then I can erase any step that I don't like, or all the steps I don't like of that sequence. Also, if I want, I can hold clear and press any of these 8 sequence buttons to clear that sequence, right? So I'm going to put it back on here to play sequence 1, which I liked better anyway. And by the way, the sequence step size, 8/16, 16ths, etc., dotted triplets, that's independent for each split. So I could have a swing 16ths feel for the drum beat that I'm playing on the right split, and I could have the 8ths playing, as I am now, for the left split. So a few other functions here. There's a copy button. So what I can do is I can hold this down and then press the source and destination. So that could be, I could select source of sequence 1 and destination of sequence 1. And now if I select sequence 1 and 2, they're both going to be the same contents. I can do the same thing for steps. I can copy a step. I can copy this step to here, or this step to here. And I can also clear a step if I want, like this one or this one. Another thing that's kind of handy is the editing sliders. So if I want to select one of these notes for editing, I would just press the step bar and select it. Notice there are 2 notes here, so I can toggle between them. I can deselect selection entirely, and then select one, and then select the other. So here's the note I'm editing, and notice you get these 4 sliders over here now. So what these are, as labeled over here, are velocity, duration, bend, and y-axis. So for velocity, if I want to see what that note's velocity is, I just hold this, and it says it's 127. So I can slide that down, and notice that if it goes below 96, it appears in green. That splits main color. Same thing for duration. I can see that it's now set to 8ths, but I can set that to anything else. I'll move it back to 8ths. And then here we have bend. Now what this does, it allows you to make micro adjustments into the pitch, up to 50 cents higher or 50 cents lower than the pitch of that note. So what I'm going to do is, right now I see that's at 0. I can make that up to 44 cents higher. Notice it's a little bit higher. Or down all the way to minus 50, and then back up to 0, right? And then lastly, I have the y-axis setting, which is right now at 127, because I must have, when I entered the note, I must have entered it towards the top of the y-axis position, and I can change that down to 0 or anything I want in between. And you see the slider shows, all 4 sliders show the approximate position, and then to see the details, you have to press on it, and then if you want to move it, you move your finger, right? So that's that, and I think we've covered most of the stuff here. What I'd like to talk about now are the sequence settings. So I press switch 1 briefly, and I now get to the sequence settings screen. There are 4 settings, and you select them at the lowest row. There's projects, drums 1, drums 2, and colors. So what projects does is this allows you to select one of 16 projects. Now each project contains all the sequence data for both splits, all 4 sequences for the left split, all 4 sequences for the right split. So if I wanted to save what I just created, I just hold down one of those project buttons, like this one, and it'll now flash red. Now if I wanted to load it back in, I just press that and it would flash green. And it'll show it now that the last one that I loaded was that particular one, right? So the data will all be there. So that's projects. And also there's a new updater app that not only allows you to update your OS version, but it allows you to save off any of those sequences or any of those projects individually to your computer. The second setting is drum 1, and then there's drum 2. In the drums view that you saw before, where each row was a particular MIDI note number, this allows you to select what those MIDI note numbers are. So it's telling me for the lowest row, row 1, it's MIDI note 36, the next one is 38, 37, 42, and these are set for, at least in the first 7 rows, the most common drums in a drum set for general MIDI note numbers. But you can change those just by sliding your finger across and change it to anything you want. And then for drum 2, that's the upper 7 rows, rows 8 through 14 if you're in the upper 2 quadrants of the drums view. And so that has the same thing. You can select one of these different rows and select its note number for editing. And then finally you have your colors view over here, your colors setting. And what this does, it allows you, if you didn't like the colors that were used for the 3 different states of the step bar, yellow for empty steps, orange, one of the new 4 colors in the 2.0.0 update for the 4 filled steps, or lime, also one of the new colors for non-playing steps, you can change those. So I select in the settings screen the 4th setting, colors, and then I have a little pictorial representation of the step bar. So this is kind of like the step bar. These are steps that have nothing in them, and I just rotate through the 10 different colors to select the color I want. Same thing for filled steps, represented by these 2 lights here. Instead of orange for filled steps, I can rotate through and select whatever color I want. And the same thing for empty steps. Instead of lime, I can choose another color. So that's pretty much it. That is the... Oh, did I talk about mutes? I didn't talk about mutes. So if I'm playing, I've got 2 mute buttons here. I can mute the left split, or I can mute the right split. And that's the new sequencer in the version 2.0.0 software, and I'll let this play out.